Our next presenter is Lisa Borelli, who has a master's in social work and clinical mental health, and she's a counselor in the Ohio State Employee Assistance Program, which is a complementary program that provides counseling and consultations and human relations training by licensed master and doctoral level mental health professionals. And she's going to talk to you about managing time in your labs.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? No? Can you hear me now? A little bit better? Okay. I'm here to talk a little bit about time management, which has a lot to do with relationships, believe it or not. The relationships we have with ourselves, the relationships we have with colleagues and coworkers, and also the relationships we have at home. I've been working with relationships for almost 30 years, not quite 30 years, but I really enjoy what I do, and I want to tell each of you, anything that we talk about today, if you would like to go over it more privately, more confidentially, and more about your own situations, please give me a call or an email and let me know if you'd be interested in getting together to talk more about what's happening as you continue in your labs, okay? I want to make sure everyone has a brochure about our services. We offer 5 complimentary sessions to any faculty or staff member. Some students are also eligible. It just depends. Mostly students can get free counseling sessions through the counseling and consultation services. But if you're interested, you can always call the toll-free number on the back of the brochure to see if you are eligible. Does everyone have a brochure? Okay, good. So we offer individual counseling, family counseling, couples counseling, marital counseling, almost anything you can think of for work-life purposes. Everything is confidential. We have nothing to do with HR, and I think somebody is here from HR that we keep picking on, but the only time our services are not confidential is if someone is at risk for harm for themselves or others, and that just makes common sense. Some of the objectives on the next slide, as you can see, are to increase your awareness of time and self-management, because time management has a lot to do with self-management. How do we manage ourselves? Everything would be really good if we could just operate out of our thinking brain. Unfortunately and fortunately, we all have midbrains where emotions are housed, and sometimes those emotions can actually outthink our intellect. So we act out of emotion. So regulating emotion is one really key, I think, to time management. We can be going along our day doing one thing after another, and if we get emotional or feel pressured or in a time crunch or feel insecure or inadequate or like we're not doing a good job, those emotions can have an effect on what we think, how we feel, and then what we do or don't do. We're going to hopefully identify 3 ways to manage your time in your life, and also identify 3 ways to manage your stress or negative emotion. We do live in a 24/7 world. Ohio State is 24/7. I know lots of you work long hours, and sometimes the researchers talk about the ideal worker, and that's someone who spends most of their time at work, not much at home, with family, friends, kids, those kinds of things. We're constantly busy. And even though there's literature that says going full speed ahead, being a human doing rather than a human being, is not good for our health. It's not good for our well-being or health. But despite that, people still have beliefs that they need to do what they're doing in order to get ahead, to be successful, and that it's required to do to get ahead. Some of you may believe that, I don't know. I know I sense a lot of passion in the room about being eager and, just excited about what you do. I'm not talking about thwarting that. I'm just talking about a balance, per se, of what you do for quality life and for satisfaction at your jobs. Next slide, please. A good place to start is just with yourself. Self-awareness. The more you know about yourself, the better able you will be able to handle stress and people in our lives, coworkers, colleagues, managers, PIs. How many people think they know themselves pretty well? Hand, okay, good. We're all on a learning curve, and I really like what I think it was Valerie said earlier about having relationships with those people that you work with and making them intentional. So it's a win-win, more of a positive relationship. We make better choices when we're less stressed. Do you ever feel stuck in a routine of your daily life? Get up, do the same thing, go to work, go to the lab, on and on. That routine can get pretty old pretty quick. And if you're working long hours, I know some of you are fatigued and maybe not sleeping as well, depending on things outside of your work, because we all have lives outside of here. And we bring ourselves to work, then we take ourselves back home again. And it's very hard to keep one separate from the other, even though we believe we can, or we say we do. It's very hard to do that because we're only one person. You might want to reflect on this just a little bit, not right now if you don't want to, but maybe later in the day or at a break. How do you enjoy life? Asking yourself these questions. Whenever we're in the future thinking, predicting, or if we're in the past going over what we should have, would have, could have done, and making up different scenarios, if we're in the past or the future, generally anxiety raises up a little bit. The place to be is right here, right where your feet are, okay? Using mindfulness, just in the present moment without judging anything. It's just a practice. You've heard of mindfulness before. Be here now. See what you can do right now. How do you want to intentionally be right this minute? And try to create that for yourself. Could you do the next slide? Thanks. How many people feel they're pretty practical? Reasonable, practical? Yeah, it's a good, nice quality to have. And it usually works pretty well unless we're emotional. So that emotional brain comes up so often during the day. And that fight or flight response kicks in probably on the average about 50 times a day or so. So these are practical suggestions that you probably already do. Setting aside your emails till a time later in the day where you can focus and concentrate just on those, right? You're not checking your email every 20, 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. I think the average is, 150 times a day that people check their emails? So some of what I'm saying is a little contrary to what we do. So it's just another way to look at it from a different perspective. Are you able to set limits with people, and are you able to say no? Or do we constantly say yes out of fear for not getting ahead? We do things a lot of times that we really don't want to do, maybe in your personal lives. And when we do, we really want to say no, but we don't. Then we start to feel resentful and, angry at other people sometimes. If we can avoid procrastination, that helps a lot. I know you understand this intellectually. Delegate things to other people. That's why we're around. Delegating, sharing with others, not taking the whole burden on yourself. Keeping lists. If you're going to be looking at your cell phone, you might as well make some lists. Cross off what you do and pat yourself on the back for that. So giving yourself credit for what you do during the day. How many people set priorities pretty well? You know what is most important. Sometimes those get confused. And sometimes we have to rearrange them. Oftentimes, we think something's a priority when maybe it's not. So like the panel said, check it out with who you're working with. What do they see as the priority? What do you see as the priority? And taking breaks. Whenever I bring this up, usually someone says, I don't have time to take breaks, right? Do you? You take breaks? Good. Just a time to reboot, rejuvenate, kind of go inside and feel grounded or centered. How many people multitask? Yeah, we all do. I do too. And it works for a while, doesn't it? Until you get over the top of that curve, and then the quality goes downhill a little bit. And then we start to feel irritable and overwhelmed and tense. And sometimes we blurt out things that we really don't mean to say, even though we do say it. Okay? We all do it. So I'm going to say something that might sound strange, but I'm going to ask you just for today to try to do one thing at a time. Focus on one thing at a time. And I know you have a lot to do. It's just a different way of looking at something. And make sure you're breathing. Your breath is one of the most natural ways to anchor yourself in the present moment. And remember, the present moment can help anxiety, worry, tension kind of decrease a little bit. All right? So it's not really what's out there that's causing the stress, the event, the person, the situation. It's really how we respond to it, what our ideas are about it, our beliefs about it. And good thing about beliefs, you can always change them, right? Your beliefs about me have probably changed since I got up here and started talking. And I don't know how that has changed, but it probably has. All right? Any questions on that? Checking your cell phone, can you agree to maybe limit how many times you check your cell phone? It may open other time to do other things that really are on your priority list. And if there's an emergency, somebody's going to tell you, right? Okay. Could we go to the next slide? Self-management. Include self-care strategies, cognitive flexibility skills, emotional awareness and intelligence, your awareness of how are you feeling, how are other people feeling in your lab, having those antennas. You can develop and use emotional regulation skills and tools. And I can teach that if you're interested. Emotional regulation skills, that's everybody's really lot in life to do. I can't control your feelings, thoughts, behavior. I can only control my own, knowing what my own are, okay? We have a Beating the Blues program. It's not just for depression or sadness. It's also for anxiety, stress, feeling overwhelmed, tense, you know, just that ongoing kind of treadmill that we find ourselves on sometimes. It's an online program for cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, so it helps take the edge off of anxiety and worry, stress, and off sadness or being down or depressed. We all have feelings and we all go through these feelings. These are natural. Emotions are not bad words. They're just experiences that we go through, okay? And hopefully they don't stick around for long. That program is open to anyone here. If you're interested in it, it has 8 modules. You do it at your own pace. However, we're upgrading it at the end of April, so this particular model will be disappearing at the end of April. So usually you can do 1 module per week. If you want it, there should be an EAP mailbox at the end of this presentation, and you can just send an inquiry, and we can send that link out to you. It's another 8 sessions that are at no cost to you to help you in your daily lives with stress and with, trying to regulate our own emotions. Thoughts aren't necessarily facts. Thoughts are ideas, hunches. And sometimes our brain believes things that we say. And you don't have to believe everything you think, especially when we're on that negative spiral, if we ever get there. I'm sure some of you do. We say things that are skewed sometimes. So this program, the Beating the Blues, the online cognitive program, helps you to learn how to relate to your thoughts and your feelings in a different way, to help you to be more able to function out of your prefrontal cortex area, not letting the midbrain have as much control over what we think, say, do, and feel. Sometimes I find myself saying, I have to do this and I have to do this at work. When I change the have to get to, I get to do this report, give this talk. That really reframes it for me, and it encourages gratitude, and it engages the gratitude that we all have inside ourselves. And studies show that having gratitude, even if you do a short list at the end of the day, helps you to feel better, more positive. Have you ever said, I'll never get all this done? This will never happen. I'm never getting out of here. Listen to what you say. You're allowed to challenge what you say to yourself. So self-talk is very important in self-management because it helps to lead to quality time management. We don't have to waste time thinking about things that aren't practical in that moment for what you're doing. Okay, next slide. Through the EAP, we talk about positive psychology, we talk about mindfulness, we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and how those can help people feel better so they can manage themselves and their time in a different way. And mindfulness is simply a self-regulatory skill that is about paying attention in 3 different ways: on purpose, without judging, and in the present moment. And if you're able to do that, even if it's for 5 minutes throughout the day, periodically, it can help increase your focus and concentration. And what it does is it decreases your stress reactivity over time if you're practicing just small periods of mindfulness. I like the non-judging part because the non-judging element of mindfulness allows us to change how we relate to our own thoughts and our feelings. And we don't have to squash ourselves or get down on ourselves or be negative toward ourselves. And I know we all have that inner self-critic. When that self-critic starts talking, how do you end up feeling? And taking actions to say something that you believe, that's accurate, that's positive, stated in the present moment might be a different perspective, just to help you out throughout the day. Do I have any avoiders in the room? We avoid the people, the conflict, the situation, or what we have to do for work. Yeah, I think some people. Any hands? We got one. Great. When I avoid, anxiety can increase. So you might as well face the fears or the anxieties the same way you do joy and happiness in your lives. Greet them both the same. And when you're feeling some negative thoughts, you can use some cognitive restructuring to change that, to tell yourself the truth, and then have some compassion for yourself. Just like you have compassion for everybody else, do you have any for yourself? How do you talk to yourself? So mindfulness can be very, very helpful, and I too can help you with that if you're interested. I've been studying it for a long time. There's really good evidence that says it's helpful, even into the cellular mitochondria part of the cell. It decreases the stress hormones that get measured, the markers. And inflammation causes what? Disease, illness. So if we're looking to kind of settle our system down a little bit so we can be content and have quality in our lives, mindfulness might be a good thing to try. Could you move to the next slide? I know someone who works in the BRT. Actually, I know several people who work here. And this particular person gave me some ideas about how to manage time in the labs, since she has a lab. This is just an illustration. She works 8:30 to 6, weekdays. Every day she sets achievable goals and gives herself credit for what she does do. She's very well organized, just like most of you. She works one day at home. She sets a half a day on her calendar to do some committee work. She allows two days to work with colleagues and then about 2 days to schedule lab work. Do you know anybody who manages their day pretty well? Maybe your neighbor sitting here? You know someone who manages their time pretty well? You can always ask them. If you don't know something, we can ask. If you don't ask, we usually assume. And when we assume, usually it's negative when we have thoughts like that. So negative thinking is very common because we all have that internal negative bias in our midbrain that's constantly looking for threats, whether it's work or production or productivity or kids or family. That negative bias kicks in very quickly. And the idea is just to realize that it's kicked in, and now how do I really want to be, intentionally be this moment. The next slide talks a little bit about 3 things that you can do every day, any day. They're free. There's no side effects. You can walk, talk, and breathe. That helps with focus, with concentration, for allowing positive emotional states to arise. So, walk around the building. Talk to each other. The researchers say that talk therapy, or talking about your innermost feelings, helps to reprocess the emotions that we feel. And so does journaling. So keeping a journal or talking about your innermost struggles with people that you trust confidentially can be very, very helpful in emotional regulation. And of course, breathing. We all know, excuse me, diaphragmatic breathing can help trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. So simple breathing exercises can be very helpful. You can breathe through emotional feelings, especially anxiety. I left a stack of these back by the coffee if anyone wants to take one and post it in your lab or in the lunch break room, just to have a visual reminder of things that you can do. You don't always have to repeat things just because we have a routine. You're allowed to go out of the box, so to speak. I don't know if you sit or stand in the labs, mostly. It's a good idea if you do sit, to get up every hour and at least stand for 10 minutes to get that circulation moving. It's better for our balance. Some of you may have standing workstations, which is good, or do walking meetings. I don't know what you do or what what kind of equipment you have, but if you can, that helps a lot. Next slide. Be your best self. You can always choose to be your best self, even if you have a headache or if you hadn't slept well or you're having an argument with somebody or a conflict. We can choose how we really want to be intentionally. Professor Jane Dutton of the University of Michigan did some studies about compassion, and she found that people who used compassion for themselves and for other people had less stress at the job and had more satisfaction with the job. Those job sites that encouraged compassion also had less turnover and more loyalty. So just think about it, how easy it is to have compassion for somebody else. And what about yourself? Are you able to say, may I be peaceful to yourself? May I feel content, at ease, And stop the judging, because when we judge, which you do in your work and which is fabulous, it's needed. But when we start to judge character or personality or what other people are doing, that really ends up hurting us, because our mood starts to go downhill, and it's not fair to the other person. So just practice non-judging for the next, I'd say, hour, just to see what it feels like. Okay? Not wishing it were different, not commenting on anything, just accepting reality the way it is. Radical acceptance. Next slide, please. Most of you are pretty resilient, and the American Psychological Association says that most people are pretty resilient. In fact, they have defined mental resilience here. The American Psychological Association, and then there's one from the Webster Dictionary. You bounce back from things. You bounce back from hurtful events. We bounce back from personal loss, grief. We bounce back from a lot of things. Some people are better at resiliency than others. And anyone who would like help with that, on our website, which is on the back of the brochure, if you go to the skill building section and then under stress management, we have 14 webinars that we did on building resilience. They're about 15 minutes in length. So they're short, quick, right to the point, easy to understand. If that's something you want to develop, go ahead and take a look at that. Next slide. Like I said earlier, in the EAP, I personally like to combine the mindfulness, positive psychology, and cognitive behavioral therapy skills to help process through our daily function. You can develop a positive attentional bias, which can help broaden then your attention, your ability to pay attention, and how flexible we are cognitively. You can be really flexible physically, and cognitively we might be very rigid and can't move very much. Learning to be cognitively flexible can help you save time and manage your time in a different way. There used to be stressors long time ago where you had a stressor, you got to come back from that, bounce back from it, then another stressor came, and we just took care of that. Today, 24/7 work hours, stressors come at us every 5 seconds or so. I'm just guessing at that. But they come quicker, and we have less time to bounce back. So it's important to use that smaller time effectively. And these are some ways that you can do that. The American Psychological Association, on the next slide, talks about 10 ways to build resiliency. These can help with internal or external resiliency. I know you do most of these most of the time. If you had to pick one to work on, which one would you choose? Only one. If you want more information on one of those, please email me. I'd be glad to give you information or to talk with you in more detail, confidentially about this, about any ways to build resiliency. How many people get good sleep? at least 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Yeah? Good for you. Your brain is working. Your prefrontal cortex is working very well. If we don't get that amount of sleep, our brains look asleep on MRI studies. So, there's lots of good literature out there on insomnia. If you're having trouble sleeping, that's another thing that we could take a look at if you're interested. And before I go to the next slide, I just wanted to mention that if you're eligible for our EAP services, that means anybody in your home, so if you have an aunt or an uncle, a niece, nephew, a grandparent living with you, a parent, they're eligible for our services. Parents and parents-in-law. So even if they live in California, they're still eligible for the 5 complimentary sessions. Okay? Last but not least, the next slide talks about vacation. And it seems to me healthcare and people in general don't use a lot of vacation time. But as you can see here, the amount of vacation time has decreased. Are you one of the 55% of Americans who leave vacation days unused? It also can help with perhaps getting a raise, even if it's a small one. Or receiving a bonus. And like I think Mary Freestad said, the job is about location, the money, and what was the third one? The work, yes. The important things that we do here every day for yourselves, for your team, and for yourselves. So keep up the passion that you have. You can create a balance if you like, if you think you need one. If you need help with it, please feel free to call me. On the next slide is the EAP's contact information. You can email about counseling. You can email about the online cognitive behavioral therapy techniques program. We offer all kinds of programs. We're actually a part of your plan for health, but we're housed in with OSU Health Plan. So we have health coaches, nutritionists, exercise experts who talk all about that with you. Health coaching is done over the phone to save you more time. You can do that from home in the evening if you're home. And if you have any other questions, you can ask them now. We have about a couple of minutes before our time's up. If you have a question, I'd be glad to try to answer it. And the mic, up to the mic. Was there anything that you learned today that you might take with you today? I know you knew most of this, but did you hear maybe one sentence or so that maybe struck a bell?
Yeah,
Struck a chord?
Raising the future, I think I was spend at least 2 weeks on vacation.
Okay, you got it. It's good for our health. Or a long weekend can be helpful.
Looking back last year, since I have 0 chance to get a raise, because I cannot take any vacation.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. And if you have questions, feel free to email or call me. Thank you.